Okay, preparing to stream live stream the meeting.
What's the temperature over there? Is it really cold?
Not really. It's around 13-19. The content is not available right now. Go to newsfeed. Why? Okay, another try. Okay, I think it's working now. Is it working? Could you check?
Yeah, it says live on Facebook, so I'm just going to check now to see that it actually is live. I think it's
Okay, do you think it's live
yeah,
now?
it's,
We are live. Okay, we're
we're on
live
the
now.
and we're on the air and we already have 14 people tuned in. Like
Okay.
literally, we just went on the air then, and already 14 people have somehow,
Yeah.
clicked tune. So that's amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
that can't be right. I'm just
Okay.
refreshing the screen. Now
Yeah.
17 people are tuned in.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Like that's just so many. Just like literally,
Mm-hmm.
you've been tuned in for 1 second. We have 17 viewers
Mm-hmm.
already.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So yeah. So this is a special edition of Track Talk
Mm-hmm.
Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
We have with us um, Ernest Labara, the
Mm-hmm.
co-founder of Pinoyathletics, who's
Mm-hmm.
doing a PhD over in Budapest, Hungary.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Thank you, Anlo, for inviting. Oh, yeah, of course. It's been a while since we hosted together the track talks. So I appreciate that. Of course, we are both again live and doing our stuff. So it's good. Yeah. And then,
So
especially that, of course, we are talking this Sunday, this weekend, in relation to the events that Pinoy Athletics hosted. The Mindanao virtual meets or virtual track meet in Butuan City, which is organized as well by our good friend Dennis Scott. So of course, since of course we are always doing the events and at the same time, so it's also a good time to assess also the performance. So perhaps you can give our audience the report that
okay,
we have from Butuan.
okay. So before I go into that, I'm just recapping this week. So this week we had a Tuesday, a Thursday. We started off on Thursday. We had a track talk with Coach Fernando de Gus discussing SEA Games qualifications and how middle distance is going in the Philippines. Yesterday, we had a very brief 15-minute track talk where we just highlighted the Butuan meet, which was held this morning. And obviously, I also highlighted that this weekend, none of the Phil American athletes have competed. So the focus shifted to the Butuan meet, with Phil Ams due to compete in the West NCAA on the 26th, Cyril Morin in the javelin, and Christina Knott competing on the 31st of um, May in Florida after her stint in Italy with two meets. And Eric Cray, obviously, he had a few meets, but he hasn't actually competed since May the 1st. So it'll be interesting to see where he competes next because he hasn't competed for about the last couple of weeks. I'm just seeing that there are a lot of meets where they don't have 400 hurdles, so he hasn't been at those meets. Anyway, regarding Butuan, yeah, so with Butuan, the big standout performance was in the men's 100 meters. We were really, like hoping that somebody would come and smash through the 11-second barrier because up until now, for the last 2 years, only the Phil American Nolan Crespo has ran 10.76 and 10.88 over in California the last couple of weeks. But the good thing was that a athlete from the province, Jerome Zarinas from Butuan City, officially came through in 10.93 in the men's 100 meters, which was a big surprise. Greatly helped, obviously, by you helping out with Kenneth John Bakulba, the 2018 bronze medalist from the UAAP, who took the second place in 11.10. And, without that photo finish, we would never be able to differentiate, the second and the third in that race, because Pakulba was second in 11.10 and Ivanoso got third in 11.11. But Kenneth Pakulba got the second place because his head went over the line first when, when Ivanoso's foot was on the line but not over the line. Kenneth Pakulba's head was already over the line 11.10 seconds into the video. So Kenneth was narrowly took the second place by 0.01 seconds in that race. But, with Jerome, at 22 years of age, to come out and, run, 10.93, that just shows me that there is a lot of talent in provinces. And, as long as it's well looked after and, well nurtured, then there are some pretty good athletes out there in the provinces that can get good results for the country. There's one Philam ahead of them, what's his name, Nolan Crespo, but take into account that, Jerome doesn't have the same advantages of, a Philam or a nationally trained athlete. He doesn't have the same resources. All he really has is that sheer desire and determination to, to really support these meets and to, basically just show up on the line and compete, which is, one of the, big steps towards success, is the fact that he really brought honor to this meet and to the brand by, just making sure that he turned up and ran. And, he's reaping the benefits of, these meets because, he ran 11.17 in the first one, and he improved over the 10.93 in the second meet. So, he had, he was very fortunate because Nicole had come from Tagum, Davao del Norte, to give him that extra push. I mean, Kenneth is a decent quality athlete because, Kenneth is a top 3 athlete in the UAAP. So he's a pretty good, athlete. Hasn't been doing as much training as he'd like, but, he's still relatively close to his personal best as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a good should we say, opportunity for Pakulba and others to run. But of course, at least we cannot really control the situation right now because still most of our colleagues in the Philippines are still on a lockdown. So we can only make the most of those regions who has lighter restrictions as compared to Manila, etc. What of course, what we can look on this performance is that it means that we can declare, or I must say, based on our assessment, that there is a new fastest man in Mindanao based on the performance, right?
Based on that, as of now, that can definitely be said. As of now, he has the fastest time of anyone in the Philippines. That's the fastest time in the last 2 years on Philippine soil. So what I'm hoping is that some of the other quicker guys, come out and start racing leading up to nationals. 10.93 is a decent time. In previous years, probably would not have ranked as high as top 2, but it's COVID time, so it's more difficult to come out and run fast times with the support. But yeah, at this point, I would say that Jerome Serenis is definitely sticking his hand up for the title of fastest man in Mindanao at this point after the day, after coming out and winning the first leg and then coming out and defending the second leg against some different guys. At this point, I would say that there are other athletes in Mindanao who, may be interested in having a shot against Jerome in the next third leg of this meet. As of now, these meets just happen, when they're available. We don't really. It's kind of sporadic, but I would like to have more of them more frequently. But it just really, depends on who's available for the meets. But
Mhm.
obviously anyone is welcome to join, and the
Mhm.
invitations are all extended out there. And I like to call this the leapfrog effect.
Mhm.
Jerome obviously um, at the start, he probably wasn't thinking about the National Open. Like he probably didn't know he was going to come out and run these sort of
Mhm.
times. He wasn't probably thinking about the National Open. But we've got the leapfrog
Mhm.
effect. And he's run 11:17. He's come out, has run the second race in 10:93.
Mhm.
And obviously, it's like what I keep saying is that the more, with competitions, you need about 5 or 6 good competitions to get ready
Mhm.
for a bigger meet, such as national championships or
Mhm.
or other, you know,
Mhm.
big peak meets. You need about five. A sprinter needs at least 5 or 6
Mhm.
races to get them ready for that big race.
Mhm.
And Jerome is already, including heats, he's already run
Mhm.
11:20, 11:17, 11:36, and now 10:93. So he's had 4 races in the last couple of months, and presumably more races coming up. So it's just he's
Mhm.
doing what he can to put himself into shape for a bigger meet like
Mhm.
nationals. So he's sort of
Mhm.
correcting all his technical issues under pressure.
Mhm.
So he's more race ready when we come to the nationals and
Mhm.
in May. And this guy's really um,
Yeah.
this guy's really what do you call it? Like
Mhm.
he's under the radar. Like I mean, he
Mhm.
was former UAAP MVP. He was with the USD high school for a while, but then he was no longer with the team. So this guy's kind of under the radar. He went back after like leaving or being out of UST. He went back to I think he may have even been dropped by
Mhm.
UST, and he went back to his province, and he's just been training there. So I think that this guy is really a good natural talent. He's just sort of really under the radar. He's actually like better known as the bronze medalist in the nationals in the 400 hurdles by Medina and Nico Del Prado back in 2018 or 2019. But like it's just that height and that long stride and that all that strength he's built up from the 400 hurdles. He's running pretty good over the 100. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how if he comes out and runs a 200. How he's going to go over the two because he's got pretty good top end speed. But yeah, apart from that, um, yeah, it was pretty good performance. I'd like to see more performances like that across the country, though. If there were more meets and we could see more performances like that coming around the country. What it's also showing me, Ernal, is that there's, like if you have more regionalized meets, you end up with a better total program than if just everybody just runs in the centralized area of Manila. This is actually showing me that if you have more meets, you develop more talent because more talent emerges when there is better athletes for them to run against. You get
Yeah.
you get more, you get better performances all round.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, um, given the situation, of course, we can only work on the regions who has lighter restrictions, and then and besides, if we cannot really allow cross-border travel, because, for example, if you're coming from, should we say, South Cotabato and Coronadal, you need to pass through Davao, and in order for you to go to Davao to Butuan, you need, and Davao has this border check that you need to have PCR test in order to pass through. So that's why if the only place in Mindanao as of this time that has fewer restrictions, then only the direction going to Butuan circumventing the roads going to Davao. Like for example, Pakulba was able to cross the border because it's already in Tagum, so he doesn't need to go
So it's
through
if you have to
Davao.
pass by Davao City where it's a problem.
Yes, as far as I know, based on the situation,
Mm.
you need to have PCR tests in order to pass through Davao. So if you don't want to get on that situation, you need to go the long road, or you need to go via Bukidnon, and
yeah,
then from Bukidnon, if you're familiar with the map of Davao or in
yeah.
Mindanao as a whole, let us see. The only way for the only if we are going to cross out Davao on all the
Yeah, you have to
venues,
go through Davao City to get to Coronado.
yeah,
I understand that. But if you're going north, you don't have. If you're going north, you don't have to pass through Davao City, right? If you're going from Tagum,
yeah.
because Tagum's already north of Davao City.
So far, if you're go geographically, if you're looking in the map of Mindanao, then the only place that you can so for example, if you are coming from Coronadal, it's impossible for you to go fast in to go to Butuan unless you will take the not so popular route from Coronadal. You go to Marawi, but of course Marawi is also blocked because of it's under reconstruction, and then you can go from Marawi to Tubod, and then Tubod to Iligan. It will be very long travel. So that's why the only persons that can go to Butuan is mostly the people from Tagum, from Surigao City and
Yeah,
Tandag, Surigao del Sur, and then
yeah,
Cagayan de Oro, and then Iligan, but and also in Bukidnon. But from southern Mindanao context,
yeah.
you need to pass through Davao if you're coming from Coronadal, General Santos, and
What about
Kidapawan.
Kitapawan? Yeah,
Yes, because
that's the one.
unless you are really determined to travel, but if for example, if you're coming from General Santos City and
Yeah,
Coronadal, you can pass by, um you can go via Cotabato City, but then from Cotabato City you need to go to the path or to the road going to Lanao del Sur in Marawi. But of course, since Marawi is under reconstruction because of the siege there 2 years ago, it's still
yeah,
impassable. And then from Marawi, you need to go to Iligan or in Tubod, and then from Tubod, you go to Cagayan, which is another, but it will take you like almost a day of travel in
yeah.
order
That's
to
it's
avoid.
the longer way to go, but it's the only
Yes,
way you can go because of the restrictions.
yes. That's why I
On
can only suggest as of this time that people from Butuan, Surigao, and based, of course, depending on the sections, because we are not familiar as of this time. So it's mostly people who are near Butuan and also Cagayan de Oro, if they can cross the border between Butuan and Cagayan, that can join the events there. But it's still
yeah.
under very tight restrictions.
Well,
So
like for example, if you were to go from say Pagadian or Tangub, you have to pass through CDO to get there.
yes,
I know
exactly.
that the thing is that what I heard with at the moment, Cagayan de Oro has a restriction, meaning that you can't go from CDO to Butuan, but that may only be in place for another week or so. It's sort of like a temporary restriction. But for example, traveling from Misamis to Butuan is allowed, but not from Cagayan de Oro City to Butuan at this point.
That's another question. So that's why, if for now, I think we can only do, here's we can suggest, if we have, sorry, we have restrictions, make the trials or the tests on the results based on their local, so that there will be no cross-boarding. So we can suggest, if possible, again subject to the restrictions provided um, by the task force, that for example, if you, Andrew, you are living in Butuan, you do your own trial only in Butuan and then publish your results. And then someone from Cagayan can also publish the results, someone from Davao, someone, so that there will be no cross-border travel. And after that, it's like that. I think it's the only way around. It's like that they will submit that their times.
Basically, what we're talking about here is having mini meets in different places, but not just having one person running by themselves. Because,
But of course, that's another question, because of course, given that although Pakulba was able to cross the border, but of course, it's not always the same thing, because it's a different situation, and then the situation is changing
yeah,
unless it's really fully open. But as of this time, it's still subject to the approval. of IATF. Yeah, so it's another question as of this time. But of course, if Pakulba was and Jerome was able to perform well, it's good. It's we hope that of course our PSC and others can really like the swimming now is having they're organizing now the bubble, so we are hoping that Patafa will follow soon to have its own standards or to provide its meets soon or its standards because Southeast Asian Games is just around the corner for this year.
The unsure, like I was asked just then when the National
Mm.
Open is going to be held, and I said, well, tentatively it's in September, but I don't have any exact date at the moment, which is in a way a logistical nightmare for a lot of coaches because you're prepping your athletes, but you don't know exactly when the peak performance is going to be. But presumably, initially, Patafa had announced it was in September, but no exact dates as of yet. What I know is that with Baguio, the training bubble in Baguio, the mayor is good to go. Like the mayor of Baguio said he's good to go with the training, but the issue is getting the IATF to sign off on the bubble.
Yeah, yeah, that's another story. But of course, we hope that it will be another. I hope that soon they will find a way or a condition to have this kind of event or like the standard so that it's another so that they can have more time to prepare or select who will be the
Yeah,
delegates for the 2021 SEA Games.
yeah, I think like what happened with a lot of regions, like obviously Nimra and Zamboanga, and I'm not. Those are the only two that I'm aware of at the moment. They were trying to talk about having regional like meets for the Polarong Pambansa, but the problem is that the DipEd's kind of already decided there will be no Polarong Pambansa this year. So they now had to move their regional meets till next year because there is no regional. There is really it's really hard for at the moment. It's almost impossible to have an athletic event with the full set of events because some events in athletics are already difficult to hold because of the equipment that's required, even without COVID. But with COVID in place, it becomes even more, logistically difficult to hold a lot of events um, because of the dangers there. Like for example, like the track events are all right, but the thing is that you've got to be careful with some of the field events, especially the throws and the jump events. If, like for example, because of the fact that people are sharing the same equipment or they're like landing in the same sand pit, you need extra precautions really need to be taken for certain events, and it's really yeah, because of the travel restrictions, it's really hard to get people in the same place. The other problem is the other problem is that what happened was all these schools in Manila, they basically went out and they did a shopping spree and got all the athletes from the provinces to come and run for NCR. And these
Mm-hmm.
athletes, because of the COVID, have gone back to their provinces. So how are they going to go and try and qualify for the Polaroid for NCR if they're in the provinces? They can't. They're not exactly having meets. NCR is under heavy quarantine. You can't exactly have meets there. So what's going to happen are all the athletes who NCR recruited, who are now back in the province, just going to compete, solely and just send in their videos? Or how is the DepEd going to sort that out? That's another issue, is that these the majority of the good athletes get picked up by NCR now before they're even finished high school. So the question is,
Mm-hmm.
how are you going to have a Palaro when those athletes aren't even in Manila anymore to try out for the NCR team?
Yeah, that's because of course most of the bulk of what the UAP schools are from NCR, so that's why they get mostly from the provinces. So So
Mm.
because especially that athletes come back to their lives, but at least the most important thing is they we hope that they continue training or they can continue their
Yeah.
activities even that we have all these restrictions as of this time.
I think that, and you've always said it's been very important to have a backup fallback plan of, regional meets and regional development because, like, in a situation like this, something like the
Mm-hmm,
UAAP is pretty much,
mm-hmm,
collapsed in the new normal. The sports system, the UAP, is pretty much collapsed because the last time we had a UAAP athletics was back in
mm-hmm,
December of 2018. Fast forward 2019, 2020, 2021,
mm-hmm,
that's 3 years of no UAAP athletics. And because of the amount of loss in revenue a lot of the schools have had due to the lack of enrollments because of really slow internet connections, students are not enrolling because they're not really getting their money's worth from enrolling because of the slow connections in the provinces. um, I think that 2022's UAAP would probably be questionable as well because schools are still trying to recover their expenses, and for schools there are higher priorities for investing their funding to rebuild rather than their sports programs right now.
yeah, that's the situation.
And I think that you need a backup system if you're going to, because if just relying on, just centralized UAAP system, then obviously, like when this sort of thing happens, you just, you know, everything kind of just goes into limbo.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm,
I mean, there are athletes who have been recruited
mm-hmm,
by UAAP
mm-hmm,
schools who have still not played a UAAP, and they're almost, they're getting to the stage where they've almost, gone by next year or the year after. They've already graduated. They've already gone through. There have been some athletes in some cases that have nearly pretty much graduated who have never played UAAP, who have been recruited. But
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So we hope that everything will be better soon. So what we can suggest now really, especially for those who are confined in their respective towns and cities but have enough space just to continue training in their open field, that they can still monitor their performance as long as they practice limited social distancing, and if there are fewer restrictions in your town or city, then get your significant results so that you can still monitor, for example, like 60 meters or like 50 or 40 meters every week, so that we can still have a better estimate on what can we expect performance on your when everything will
yeah.
be open up. So it's a
I would
matter.
honestly recommend Ernell, if any coach can afford it, they go onto lazada.ph, and for just over 1,000 pesos, including
Mhm,
delivery, they go and buy a measuring wheel because a measuring wheel is a very handy tool to have for any coach, especially if you don't have a track oval with the
mhm,
marked up measurements. Because with a measuring wheel, you can get a more accurate
mhm,
measurement with a measuring wheel, and it's a lot
mhm,
easier to measure with a measuring wheel than to get a, because a
mhm,
measuring wheel can do up to about 999
mhm,
meters, whereas
mhm,
you get a measuring tape that might only go 50 meters or
mhm,
30 meters. You have to pull out the
mhm,
whole tape
mhm,
and to get it right, and then you have to leave a
mhm,
mark, and you have to measure
mhm,
again. I think a measuring
mhm,
wheel is it's way
mhm,
easier and quicker to
mhm,
use than a measuring tape because it doesn't,
mhm,
it's less effort, and it's
mhm,
fairly accurate as long as you
mhm,
roll it properly flat on the ground. In
mhm,
order to get more accurate distances, use that
mhm,
measuring wheel.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's right. So it's important that we can try looking for other significant ways to improve performance. It's really a matter of being more resourceful and being creative at the same time.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I
that's right.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, definitely yes. I'm just going to think about the situation as a whole. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, looking at
Mm-hmm.
September to National Open, so that's June.
Mhm.
So we're almost over May. So there's June, July, August. So there's only three. Really,
Mhm.
there's just over 3 months until this proposed,
Mhm.
tentative National Open. You've
Mhm.
got 3 months, or maybe 3 months and a week till the
Mhm.
National Open. So you've got about 12,
Mhm.
13, 14 weeks to National Open.
Mhm.
Then after National Open, we've got Sea Games. Athletics will start on the 21st of November. So that's 3 weeks plus all of
Mhm.
October. So that's 7, 8.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's about maybe 12, so September, October, so that's
Mhm.
8.
Mhm.
Right. There's about another 25. There's about 25 weeks until the Sea Games actually,
Mhm.
because we're about halfway through the year at the moment, and the Sea Games is
Mhm.
like towards the end of November. So yeah, there's still 25 weeks to the Sea Games, so that's still quite a bit of time.
Mhm.
But at the same time, that halfway between now
Mhm.
and the Sea Games is the National Open. So you've got the National Open 12, 13 weeks into that 25-week cycle to
Mhm.
the Sea Games. So it's, and
Mhm.
then presumably you have to perform at the National Championships when it's actually
Mhm.
finalised. So that'll be
Mhm.
like 12, 13-week cycle of 3 months, and then another 3 month
Mhm.
cycle athletes ready
Mhm.
for the Sea Games, depending
Mhm.
on like if an athlete's
Mhm.
just gonna, well, put it. I think that this is how I see it.
Mhm.
That if we're going off the bronze medal standards for the Sea Games, if an athlete
Mhm.
qualifies with that bronze medal standard for the Sea Games,
Mhm.
then unless we're in an event which has significantly improved a lot, the athlete should really be going for a medal. If they have hit the medal standard, they should be going for a medal. But like,
Mhm.
yeah, so if they let athletes into the team who are nowhere near medals, then obviously you can't. If they do get a medal, that's a plus, but you can't really expect a medal from an athlete who gets in
Mhm.
who's just nowhere near the medals. So
Mhm.
I would think that you really can't afford
Mhm.
to include athletes in the Sea Games who are not
Mhm.
anywhere near medals because of
Mhm.
the expense of the extra expense of sending them because of the COVID. You've got the quarantine time and the fact that the PSC
Mhm.
just came out and said they've only got 100 million where they
Mhm.
need 200
Mhm.
million. They're sort of hustling for more from the
Mhm.
LGUs. You can't
Mhm.
really, if they've only got a limited budget, they can't really send everybody, whoever they want to the Sea Games. You have to just really limit it to the ones who are really hitting the standards.
Yeah.
Because if you in the athletes that are hitting the standards, you're probably going to end up with about 30 to 35 athletes in the athletic team. But if you send anyone, who they want to go, then who they want to send, then you end up getting 50 athletes or 60 athletes, which is just way too many because you had 70 when you hosted, 63 I think when they hosted. So obviously it'll be half that when it's overseas because of the additional expense.
Mhm. Yeah, that's another situation that we can look on how athletes will manage training how many months before SEA Games. So we hope
Well,
that
I said
everything
it's
will be
like
better.
20. I go off weeks, so I said it's about 25 weeks to the Sea Games, and halfway through that, about 12 to 13 weeks in. So about half. We're about National Open is halfway between now and the Sea Games. So you've got about 13, 12 and a half, 13 weeks to the National Open. You've got about 12 and a half weeks to the Sea Games after the National Open. So you've got about 25 weeks to the Sea Games. So think about it. The Sea Games is on at around this time of the month in November. So that's still um, that might be 6 months. That could still be 6 months. Actually, that it's just under 6 months to go
Hmm.
towards to go till the Sea Games.
Hmm.
So think about it. It's quite a lot of time. Obviously, you need the whole 6 months. You don't want it to be like 4 months or 3 months or 2 months and then panic when you get closer to the actual Sea Games. You actually want that whole 6 months, and presumably not just the whole 6 months, but you'd hope that the athletes who had actually, been doing something during the pandemic, like to keep fit as well. Um, if they're going, it's going to be difficult if athletes are going in like now, work basically off zero, zero fitness.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd
So
expect at least general or base fitness, coming into 6 months out. You wouldn't expect them to basically, have been doing absolutely nothing and then just trying to sort of just get back into, jogging and, general cardio.
yeah, so at least important is they train on it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they should have already been doing something like even cross training or doing
Mm-hmm.
something to stay fit and keeping the weight down during the COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so otherwise, you're really just sort of like you're really playing catch up if you're
Mm-hmm.
sort of just getting back into general training now
Mm-hmm.
with 6 months to go because of the amount, 2 years or so without any competitions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So for now, we can wait and see what will be the situation in the next few days. I mean,
Or
few days or months. Yes, I mean, yeah,
months really.
yeah, yes, yes.
Um, Yeah, it'll be interesting to
Mm,
see how that, like when the
mm,
approval gets done. Because the thing I want to also highlight is that really none of our
mm,
national athletes been vaccinated yet. Over in Vietnam, they're already, the private
mm,
companies got behind the
mm,
cost of the vaccinations, and already the Vietnamese athletes are being vaccinated. So, it'll be interesting to see when our athletes actually get those vaccinations. Because once you get those vaccinations, you can kind of relax a little bit and go into normal training. Once if you're an athlete and you get vaccinated, it gives you a lot of peace of mind that
mm,
you're like not impossible but unlikely at that point to get stricken with the COVID if you've been vaccinated,
mm,
um, rather than having to worry about getting
mm.
infected when you're trying to train.
Yeah. So it's another important point of view because, of course, not all the time that we can see excellent performance. Or the thing is, what kind of or level of competition that we will have soon.
To be honest, like with the amount of time that's left for the Sea Games, there's a lot of work needs to be done in a short amount of time. Meaning, like like not much has really happened in the last 1.5 years in athletics and like locally. I mean, look at the Philams competing, Phil Americans competing overseas, which is great. But like they're the US like
Mm,
supported system, but US collegiate systems, US events,
mm,
they're like that's sort of managing pretty okay.
mm,
Like it could be better, but it's sort of managing okay. But
mm,
locally, like local athletes,
mm,
like a lot needs to be done in 5 or 6 months in order, like a hell of a lot
mm,
more needs to be done in 5 or 6 months than has been done in the last
mm,
1.5 years in order to, get the athletes ready
mm,
for the for the Sea Games, or even
mm,
just getting them ready for the National Open, because take into account there's only 3 months to go before the National Open, or 12 weeks. So at
mm,
that point, you need to be in a decent shape so you can sort of qualify into the Sea Games. Then, obviously, that's the harder part. Once you've qualified in,
yeah,
then you just need to continue training sort of without anything else to worry about except for the Sea Games at that point.
yeah, that's right. So that's another um, point of view how we will see those things after, especially with our counterparts who are more proactive on how they mitigate the effects of the pandemic. So I think, but of course, I hope that even with the situation, of course, it's easy to say, and also we are all aware that, of course, everyone and everybody in the world were affected by the pandemic, both physiologically, psychologically, and also the management of all different tasks. Because, of course, we cannot I'm 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 a little sure that, of course, if there is a regression on the performance of an athlete, especially in these times, of course, we can easily say that, of course, we're affected by the pandemic, of course. So we can't really, we can include that in one factor. But of course, we must also note that even if everybody of us are affected by the pandemic, it doesn't mean that we can use it as a simple excuse on the on the sudden impact of the performance.
Honestly, looking at where the best I agree, and honestly with that, I think that we need to look at where the other Southeast Asian countries are. In particular, somewhere, like the example
Mhm,
for me is a country like Indonesia, which has
mhm,
just got as bad pandemic situation as the Philippines in terms of percentages.
mhm,
Obviously, it has a larger population, so it has more cases and more deaths. So, but percentage
mhm,
wise, it's pretty much the same, almost similar to the Philippines
mhm,
in terms of how bad the COVID
mhm,
situation is there. However, the Indonesian Athletics Association is still sending its athletes overseas to meets. It just sent their two athletes over to um, where was it? Over to Japan. It sent
mhm,
their sprinter and their long jumper over to Japan. It's sending 15 of its athletes over to Kazakhstan at the end of June. So, even Indonesia is giving their athletes international exposures at this point. I
mhm,
don't know. Like the thing is with Indonesia is they're very secretive when they have meets, and they're very good at hiding their meets, even from myself,
mhm,
who has connections, who can find these meets. They're very good at keeping meets secret. So
mhm,
I don't know. Indonesia may or may not be having meets at the moment, but it certainly
mhm,
is sending athletes to other countries to get them ready for the Sea Games.
mhm,
Singapore is having all comers meets once a month
mhm, mhm.
to, to get their athletes ready for the Sea Games, which are only for Singaporean athletes.
Mhm,
Vietnam is vaccinating its athletes.
mhm.
It's had meets pretty much almost every couple of
Yeah.
months. In
Mhm,
Thailand, all
mhm,
their sprinters, I saw them training at their brand new stadium in Bangkok. So they're all,
mhm,
all the national
mhm,
athletes are already in. I'm not sure if they've formed training bubbles or training
mhm,
camps, but they're all training like at track ovals, in
mhm,
their events. So the Thais have trained uninterrupted as well,
mhm,
leading up to the getting them ready for the Southeast Asian
mhm.
Games.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another.
But my
Mhm,
concern is with the National Association is it's not, like, again, with some of these
mhm,
athletes that came in from overseas, I got
mhm,
nothing, like they've the ones like Phil Ams, and so, like obviously I was instrumental at the start of bringing some of these guys in, so I know a lot about them, about that situation. But the point is that, in my view, I mean, it's great, that they want to compete for the Philippines, and they, obviously sacrifice a lot, the same as everybody else, maybe even more so, about having a career or whatnot. They do a lot of sacrifice, as does any athlete. However, I just think that, in my view, that the National Association really
I was,
should be helping out local athletes as well. Like, there's no reason it can't do both. You know, when we get closer to the Sea Games, it's like the PSC and the PSC, not just Philippine track and field, but the PSC is like saying, oh yeah, our athletes can't train because of COVID, so we're just going to get athletes from the states who are training at the moment. You know,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what that's getting at. I have nothing against the athletes. I mean, they all, having been an athlete myself,
Me,
they all sacrifice a lot
me,
to compete for the Philippines, like the likes of
right.
Not and like um, and Eric and like Natalie.
I,
They all sacrifice a lot to compete for the Philippines. So I'm not having to go at them. I'm saying is that locally, what is being done is more my point. My point is what is being done locally to help the athletes.
yeah, that's right. Anyway, so I guess we can wrap up our session for this evening, and we hope that we can meet you again soon. And also, we have some other coming guests in the next few weeks once we already started the events. By the way, we will make sure that, of course, when borders are open up here in the European Union, that we will make sure that we will have more coverages of the events here. And then one thing that we can also advise is, of course, given the pandemic situation, of course, with all the things that is happening right now, is to stay relevant and to stay as much as possible, to have some level of physical fitness, especially not only for our athletes, but also to our in the elite section, but also in the grassroots athletes. And then at the same time, making sure that, of course, we take care of our health most of the time. Andrew?
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up tonight. I'm just
Yeah,
saying our next updates, as I mentioned before, due to the small amount of meets going on, is a lot on. We're having to branch a lot on international track news at the moment. Due to the lack of coverage of news stories to write about in the Philippines and Philippine athletics. So, looking forward to the good 100-meter women's diamond league at Gateshead, which will be on tomorrow night, with Sha'Carri Richardson lining up against Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price over
yeah,
in England. And then in Doha on the 25th, I think, at the Diamond League, the girl from Thailand is competing in the triple jump. So it'll be also interesting to see how Perinia goes over in Thailand um, in the triple jump. Then on the 26th of May, um, Tara Moran is competing in the West NCAA
yeah.
finals. She's got that meet, and then she has other. That's her last school meet, I think, and then she has
Mm-hmm.
other non-school meets where she's chasing after the qualification standard for the Sea Games javelin throw. And then Christina Knott will compete on the 31st of May. I'm not sure if that's her last competition leading up to the Olympics because the cutoff's June 29th, but that's the only one that we've had announced so far is that Christina Knott will be competing on the 31st of May in Florida.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we hope that Casino Not will still have enough leeway to qualify for the Olympic Games and
Yeah,
other national track athletes aside from EJ Obiena, who's also training steadily here in Europe, especially in Italy.
yeah. I mean, EJ's. I'm not sure if he's got any meets before the Olympic Games, but he's in pretty good shape. Leading up to the games, and he's really focused on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right.
All right.
Yeah. Okay,
So,
buddy. So thank
yeah,
you very much for inviting me, and also at the same time, may stay tuned and stay healthy to everyone. God bless and take care.
okay. We can
Okay, we can end the stop live stream.